We're like on a strange roll with some high profile directorial debuts here. I kind of dig it. Obviously, John Krasinski here in his directorial debut, going the horror route like Jordan Peele. Very different films though, clearly. I mean, this one looked interesting right away from the trailers, and just the hype has been building up to ridiculous levels up to the release. Hey, it didn't really let me down at all. I mean, first thing I gotta get out of the way is that it's not groundbreaking. It still hits a lot of the same horror tropes you've probably seen before, and that might bother some people. I mean, I don't think it's gonna really get you with any twists as far as the plot goes, but I mean, hey, I know what the plot is in all the Marvel movies, and I'm still invested in what's going on because it's a well-made film, and this is a well-made film, and I still very much cared about what was going on because the film kind of distracts me from the fact that, oh, well, of course, I know that was going to happen next. Probably should get into what the film is about quickly. It starts 89 days after these aliens came to Earth, and society's dead. The film establishes that there's very few survivors. Everything's pretty much gone. And all we know is that these creatures are blind and they hunt by sound. So the kind of thing is that you can never be loud or else they'll find you and they'll kill you. The way I kind of see it, every horror film has one or two, three scenes where hero is trapped in the room with the killer or whatever it is, and they have to hide in a locker underneath the table, and they can't make a sound or else they'll be dead. It's kind of like that sort of tension, except extended throughout an hour-and-a-half feature film. Since that tension's always there, the film does a great job of enhancing the tension by just putting the characters through increasingly sound-provoking moments, whether that be pain might induce screaming, which often is what they go for. That's really what kept me on the edge of my seat throughout the film, because it kept really upping the stakes in each moment as far as how could they possibly not make noise, or even they made noise, how are they going to get out of it now? And it's a small cast. There's really 4, 5, I think 7 people total in the entire film, and the main characters are this family. And John Krasinski and Emily Blunt do fine jobs establishing their roles in the family, and certainly their relationship with each other and their relationship with the kids. But really, for me, it was the daughter that stood out. First, it was a very active choice to make her a deaf character in a film that was all about sound, and that brought around a lot of very interesting moments throughout the film. And the coolest thing was that sometimes we would hear from her perspective, and then when we jump back into normal, you start to notice those steps on the sand, or those steps on the wooden floor, or those whispers a little louder than before, because now you know what absolute silence sounds like. And then even more is when they cut from absolute silence to a bigger noise, and it really kind of makes you jump, as they intended. And beyond that, the daughter is really a crux of a lot of emotional moments in the film, and the actor just was totally up to the task at every moment. Really had me believing in her relationship, especially with her father, which is a huge thing in this film, as well as with the rest of the family. You know, this kind of goes back to something I said in The Shape of Water, but there's a lot of sign language in this film, so you gotta kind of be ready to read. Unless you know ASL, of course. But it still amazes me, as someone who doesn't interact with that culture a lot, how much emotion that they're able to get through with the intensity of their signs and repetition and the facial expressions that go along with them. And I think it's even more impressive when I think outside of the daughter, most of them probably learned it for this film, or at least don't have to use it every day. The creature designs themselves are great. Obviously, you don't get to see them a lot in the beginning, and then they slowly reveal them, and when you do see them, it's not disappointing. It lived up to the expectations the film itself built up, and they sound really, really creepy, which is important because you hear them way more than you see them. And I don't know if it's just because horror isn't really my favorite genre and I haven't seen a ton of horror films. I don't have a ton to say on this. even though I really did enjoy it. I just think if you like horror movies, you probably have seen it already, and if you haven't, what are you waiting for? It's a fantastic horror film. But if you don't like horror, I don't think it's going to change your mind, because it does kind of still play into those tropes, but it just does those tropes as well as you can and hides them as well as you can behind the performances, behind everything that I mentioned.